please hype this video with the button down below. Just the other day, the Liberal Party released their 500-page budget for 2025, touted as transformational by the Liberals, reckless and wasteful by the Conservatives, whose demands were that the projected deficit to be exactly what was projected a year ago, before we had like a trade war with the world superpower, or whatever, I guess. The Bloc Québécois said that the Liberals were negotiating without any goodwill and that their negotiations were mostly media stunts. After none of the 6 non-negotiable demands they made weren't accepted, that alone would have added, quote, between 6.5 and 7 billion, most of which would have only went to one province. And the NDP, well, the 5 of them just got back from nap time, so they're still sounding out all the letters on the pages. The NDP interim leader, Don Davies, took a break from learning that blue and red make purple so that Elizabeth May could tie his shoes and send him off in front of all the camera people so he could say his line. New Democrats will take the time to study the budget and talk to Canadians. We will have more to say in the coming days. All right. By the way, if you think those flashes of bright lights are like cameras taking photos of him, it's just his shoes when he's walking. With everything going on and the Liberals still needing a few votes from other parties to avoid the government toppling, it's fair to say that there is chaos in Parliament. In the House of Commons, the Senate hasn't done anything since weed was legalized. But if we take a step back for a little bit of context onto why everything is so chaotic over there, last month, the Parliamentary Budget Office released its September Economic and Financial Outlook. And despite being the most boring sentence imaginable, it's pretty important. It's actually really important. The PBO is a well-oiled machine. It's one of the few government agencies that does not around at all. They make the reports easily accessible and fairly readable to the average person. They have a plethora of free tools on their website that allow you to understand Canada's fiscal and economic position better. And the OECD has even ranked Canada consistently as the world's best independent fiscal advisory institution, beating out the United States, which for some reason has been declining. That's kind of weird. And after everything I've said, most importantly, they are the only government agency I know of to have their website in dark mode. Inshallah. Anyway, we stand the PBO. We love the PBO. They do the best goddamn work ever. Anyways, that September EFO took a sledgehammer to Canada's finances. Interim leader of the PBO, Jason Jacques, I think, spoke to the algo. Don't ask what that stands.
I'll hazard a response. It should be very alarming, right? These are, I don't know, I think I used the words in French, and which the translators probably got really well, like stupefying, shocking. Right? This is not like it's not a funny fiscal outlook. It's a really serious fiscal outlook. And we don't lightly use the word unsustainable, right? Unsustainable means you don't have the option of saying maybe I'll wait a couple of years, I'll see how things go. It means if you don't change, this is done, right? So it's very serious. And I think, as anyone who's managed a household budget knows, if you sit down at the end of the month and you don't have enough money to pay your bills, and it happens month after month after month, you know that something's going to break.
The PBO's new projections for Canada's growth are much lower than what they had in March. For 2025 alone, real GDP, so GDP growth minus inflation, was around 1.7%, which honestly isn't bad, except now that growth has been cut down to 1.3%. And they expect growth to be consistently lower every year, all until 2030. That makes our spending situation kind of dicey. While slower economic growth is one thing, and you might even say, Hudson, who cares if real GDP growth is only 1.3%? We're still growing at 1.3% minus inflation. That's cute and all, but longtime fans of the channel, like channel member shoutout Taiwan DXT, are smarter than the average bear and have listened to me say stuff in the past, like don't ever listen to influencers who just say the dollar amount of the debt or the deficit, because they are most likely just trying to manipulate you with big numbers. Now, the same strategy that applies to the money flowing out of our pockets should work going in. That sounded wrong. Now, the same strategy and thought process regarding the money that is coming out of our pockets should be the same thought process we use when money is coming into our pockets. Only looking at one half of the equation doesn't make sense, because when you only look at one half of the equation, you don't get a full picture. You don't get the whole thing. I mention this because the growth is still positive, but that doesn't make it enough to do well by our previous obligations, aka the federal debt. According to the PBO, the federal debt to GDP ratio is finally about to climb after being expected to slowly decline after the post-COVID spike, which is really bad. really bad. For those who don't know, because they only listen to conservatives who fearmonger about the debt, or they just don't know any better, governments take out debt to invest in their citizens and to make them more productive. They then use the increased productivity to pay for the cost of the debt and then a little extra. So if I were to spend $10 on a new high-speed rail line from Winnipeg to Brandon, and the interest rate on the debt is 5%, which is kind of high. And let's say that some quantitative agency that we probably paid way too much goddamn money to, says that if we do this and we invest this $10, then we'll increase the productivity of our citizens and they'll make more money because of it. So much so that if we do this investment, our actual return will be 10%. Therefore, we get to improve the lives of our citizens, add some economic activity, and pocket a cute little 5%. And then with that 5%, we can use that to fund whatever we want, like the great Canadian pastime of making sure that the Trudeaus just have all the money. They deserve all the money. And plus, even more importantly, all the autistic-ass Canadian high-speed rail YouTubers will finally shut the fuck. So if younger Hudson is still watching this, and I'm still a conservative, and you keep on yapping about the deficit, big man, there's other parts of it, but it's fine. I still love you. So say it with me, class. It's not about how much debt you take out. It's about if the money is being effectively spent. But going back to Trudeau, his government was notorious for having a fiscal rule that the federal debt to GDP should never be getting higher, only lower, which is good. If you're ever wondering whether we are actually being useful with the money we take out in debt, just look at the federal debt to GDP ratio. That is what is more important than anything else. As long as this is going down, so long as the percentage of our GDP that we are able to take out in tax revenue stays roughly the same, everything should be fine. Everything should be fine. Roughly. It's at least sustainable. It's sustainable. That's what that means. And largely, under Trudeau, the debt was sustainable. Under Trudeau's government, as you can see here, it was technically true that he ran 4 small deficits that grew the size of the economy faster than the debt. And then COVID happened. That's a story for a different day, though. It's largely explainable, but that's a different story for a different day. Back to the present with the PBO's most recent projections. As you can see here, federal debt to GDP ratio is expected to increase instead of decline, which is not good. This means the debt is unsustainable. It cannot keep going like this. It's bad news bears. This is really bad, and basically results in the government just taking out money, most likely to appease the baby boomers, and then putting it down the road onto younger generations, which is great. We love this. We love this. However, the federal debt to GDP ratio climbing isn't the worst thing in the world, considering it has gone up before and then gone down. It's not the end of the world. If we can just avoid a really bad economic downturn, like a recession, and continue slow and stable growth that outpaces the interest on our debt, we'll be fine. Meaning as long as the asset prices holding up consumer spending, like home prices in the stock market, continue to rise, or at least stay at the levels they are at right now, we should be... Yes, good news for Zoomers. Home prices are starting to decline. Let's go. Bad news for literally everyone. First, and then eventually, like the next day or two, Zoomers, because they feel the downstream effects of it. The house prices are starting to come down. Uh-oh. By the way, how cool is this shirt? I found it at the thrift store. It's got the Buffalo Bills logo on it. For like $12, I got this. AKA a steal. And there might actually be some young people who are like, hey, now, Mr. the Prime Minister just won an action on lowering prices. Why don't we want lowering prices now? I still want prices to be lower, and that's fair. So why all of a sudden is it the case that we don't want home prices to go down? Why we want them to stay up? Excuse me, beg your pardon. If you spend plenty of time in econ spaces, you may have heard the term V-shaped recovery. It's where the economy goes like down, but then it goes back up again. And if you spend even more time in econ spaces, you may have heard the term K-shaped economy. This is where the economy is doing really well for the people who are like at the top half, but the people at the bottom half are doing worse and worse. You see, because it's like, you get it, because you're fucking smart. Basically, the economy for the minority on the top is doing nothing but going up, and the bottom half, things are getting worse and worse and worse. You get it. You do get it.
Yeah, I think that
this interpretation is correct, because literally every single statistic I've seen says it is. So boom, fuck you. I think the only thing that is holding up the broader Western economy right now is rich people feeling like great and comfortable with spending a little moolah here or there because all their assets are through the roof. But if something were to happen to these asset prices, then all these rich people probably wouldn't feel that comfortable spending so much goddamn money. And then boom, as soon as people stop spending money, your economy goes down. And the two assets mainly holding up rich people into this feeling of comfortability with the economy right now are houses and stocks. Housing, which is its own thing, and then the stock market being incredibly overvalued. Oh boy. And that overvalued stock market is mainly because of the AI frenzy and what some are even calling a bubble, which does not look good that's not a good sentence you want to hear. But on housing right now, the Canadian housing market is actually like a bomb that has to be perfectly diffused or it'll blow up an entire country. Diffuse it too quickly and you could absolutely cripple the economy like from 2008, and diffuse it too slowly and you'll basically guarantee that young people will continue to be screwed over and all the problems that flow from putting more time and care and attention and capital into the older generations than young people. And trust me, there are plenty of problems that come from that. Just ask Italy and Japan, will rear their ugly head and doom your economy to decades upon decades of stagnation. Well, is it really the case that if we entered a recession, we'd be doomed to economic ass? Economists have predicted 20 out of the last 3 recessions. So why isn't it the case that you'd probably be wrong about the magnitude of the recession as well? Well, number one, you see how number one, basic macro econ would say that whoa. Oh, I'm so cool. Well, number one, basic macroeconomics would say that you need some sort of stimulus to Jesus. Well, number one, basic macroeconomics would say that the government is required to have some sort of an intervention to prevent anything from happening. This is the broad opinion after the Great Depression, which is when everyone just got really sad. Sometimes it's the government coming in and just banning a certain thing, and that can work out good enough. But more often than not, that means the government coming in and doing some sort of fiscal stimulus. And number two, recessions are very rarely only domestic. When there's a recession in one country, there tends to be recessions in other countries because it spreads like a virus. No, not that. But to be fair, let's look into the numbers. Let's see if Canada has the fiscal headroom to be able to survive a recession. Although Canada does, look, I'm sweating. I hate recording this room so much. Although Canada does only have a federal debt-to-GDP ratio of roughly 45%, that doesn't take into consideration provincial debt, which makes it a lot higher. And when looking at the Canadian federal and provincial federal debt, we very, very, very quickly run out of room. To start out with the absolute max debt a country can realistically have, it's like 130, maybe 140% if you're pushing. Throughout history, there has never been a country that has had above a 140% debt to GDP ratio and been able to get out of that without getting their ass whipped, which means a loss in investor confidence. That means no one will want to lend them any money for the foreseeable future, which of course leads to slower economic growth. The results being incredibly high and painful inflation rates that eventually leave the currency worthless. Drastic austerity, which of course also leads to slower economic growth. But worst of all, tourists. Anyway, to put in perspective our fiscal capacity, out of all the G7 countries, we're like not bad. The only 2 countries with lower GDPs than us are obviously the Germans with 63.89%, then the British with 101.29%, us with 110.77%, then the French with 113.11%, the United States with 120.79%, and the Italians with 135.33%, and then the Japanese with a crazy 236.66%. God damn. However, before the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada had a debt-to-GDP ratio of roughly 90.21%. And then following the pandemic, Canada had a debt-to-GDP ratio of 118%, which is kind of a lot, especially considering that if we did that again, we would have a 140% debt-to-GDP ratio, which is a lot. That's too much, and that's you're over. Game over. Bye-bye. To be fair, if you were looking at strictly our debt-to-GDP ratio, you wouldn't really get the full picture on our fiscal headroom because Canada doesn't mess around with this kind of stuff and has literally some of the most trusted financial institutions in the world, because Canada has a very good track record with its debt and finances, where we have shown that if we do enter a deficit crisis like we did in the 90s, we have the political capital to fix it because of the way that it breaks down provincially and federally, leading to each part of the country individually having low debt to GDP ratios instead of doing it like the Americans, where they just have a federal debt to GDP ratio 3 times ours. And finally, because of the unique way that Canada structures its pension plan, resulting in like a stupid low net federal debt to GDP ratio of 14%, means that Canada's credit rating of AAA is much higher than that of the United Kingdom's, for example, of AA, even though the United Kingdom actually has a lower debt to GDP ratio. By the way, that federal net debt to GDP is more of a financial trick to avoid political malfeasance. Canada's pension plan is completely independent and managed by the CPP. Normally, for most other countries, their pension plans loan the government money, effectively making the fund's returns tied to the government's ability to grow the economy. But since Canada's pension plan is independent, the government can come in and say, hey, loan us some money, and the pension plan can tell them to go kick rocks. I do like that Canada has a consistent track record of no nonsense when it comes to the debt, but I don't particularly like this because I would rather we don't maximize the returns of old people and pensioners and instead try to maximize the returns for our country. To put it in perspective, the fund as of June 30th, 2025 has an assets under management of $731 billion, or 750 billion. However, the pension plan holds investments in 55 countries, meaning other countries are using that money to grow their economy, but we're not using all the money to grow our economy. Realistically speaking, there are higher returns to be made out in the world than just Canada, and so if we tried to limit it to just Canada, it would grow slower, but the benefits of that faster growth only go to old people. So again, it comes down to who should we benefit more, young people or old people, and only one of those people actively contribute to the tax base, come up with new ideas, are the ones who can still have kids, but aren't because they feel like they can't get ahead, leading to consistent population decline. So we should probably benefit the boomers more. And that's the reason that Canada's net debt is always so much lower than its actual debt. It's literally just because of how the pension plan is structured and how absolutely massive it is. That's it. If you're ever debating someone about the debt and they say we have the lowest federal net debt to GDP out of any country as to why we can spend recklessly, then you can point them to this section of the video. They're dead wrong. I hope by watching my videos you begin to understand just how important trust and reputation and stability is, not just to like global financial markets, but like basically everyone. I don't want to buy a house if I know there's a chance that even the absolute picosecond I turn around, the whole thing is going to be on fucking cinder blocks and my fucking deck and basement got stolen by the entirety of O Block, okay? I'm not going to do that. But to put how important our good name and how much other countries can trust us into perspective, we are banking a lot on our good name fiscally here. France, a country that has practically the exact same debt to GDP ratio as us, was just downgraded. Now, they were downgraded because of political instability and the fact that their budget deficit as a percentage of GDP is astronomical compared to ours, which you could argue that we are nowhere near because our government isn't literally collapsing every other day, and our out-of-control deficit is pretty tame by international standards. But they got downgraded from AA- to A+, by Fitch, who gave them a negative outlook. Standard & Poor's also downgraded them from AA- to A+. However, they were a little bit nicer. They gave them a stable outlook. And Moody's really threw a curveball by not downgrading their credit rating, but gave them a worse outlook from stable to negative. All of this happening in the same month had an actual negative impact for France. Their 10-year borrowing cost, aka their interest rate, on their debt in June was like 3%. But because of their credit rating almost getting downgraded by all three credit rating organizations, their borrowing costs started soaring. And by September 9th, their borrowing cost actually surpassed that of, and I'm not kidding you here, Italy at 3.48% to Italy's 3.47%, which is insane. And after all was said and done, it eventually peaked at 3.6% in late September. That may not sound like a lot, but having your borrowing cost go up almost by a whole percentage point in a matter of months is fucking drastic. If we were to be downgraded like that and our cost for borrowing were also to go up by like a whole percentage point, without an effective pivot, that would mean lower growth by either everyone being squeezed even more with the raising of taxes or the lowering of services, and it can be catastrophic for the government as a whole. So although Canada might not be able to make it out of a recession if one were to happen, we're still benefiting from the fact that we are basically the cleanest dirty shirt in the bin. You gotta wear something. So that is everything you should probably know before reading the 2025 Canadian budget. Oh fuck, I gotta read. Now before I really break down the budget, I want to take a few seconds to plug a few things. Okay, please. Obviously, becoming a member is my preferred way for you to directly support me. It makes it just so much easier to make like these very long, heavily researched videos. Thank you so much for all the members. That's my preferred way to support me. Please become a member if you can. If you can. I don't just want this channel to become like every other Canadian political channel and start posting like daily slop. Even though I know it would make way more money, I don't want that for this channel. And I will do that eventually, just on like a second channel, because I've had this one for a while, okay? It means more to me than that. But I'll say it a million times, the best way to support me is to just join the community. Join the Discord down below. That's the best way to do it. Just join the community, please. For the size of my channel, we have like a stupidly active and incredibly engaged community, fit for all walks of life, from the guy who keeps touching his cat's penis whenever he shows him off. Why? The sometimes more unsung than I would like to admit heroes of the community, like Romanian Andy, the engine that keeps my Discord server going, Evening Swan, PC Steve, Kaiser Kobe, Penguin, Indigenous Guy, Luxane, Raging Atheist, Evan, and Envra, Taiwan DXT, MyQ, Greymint, everyone else. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. I do actually believe that the Discord server has, resulted in more investment than any of my other videos or streams have. Without it, I would have like half the members I do right now. Anyways, speaking on investment, if any one word from the goddamn budget could be used to summarize the whole thing, it would be the word investment. Investment is definitely Mark Carney's focus right now. And it makes sense. For decades, Canada's suffered from a lack of investment, to put it lightly, which has caused Canada's productivity to stagnate. And of course, right after productivity comes real GDP per capita. In fact, productivity is... It's basically just real GDP per capita, basically. Full stop, Canada has to become more competitive to private investment and capital. This is the economic reality of the situation, as much as I don't like it. I'll stop you right there, though. Do I like this budget? Honestly, not particularly. I'd say I appreciate this budget like a 4 out of 10. But just because I have my own personal problems with this budget doesn't mean that I don't think that this is the, that this party's plan isn't the only one that I think would take Canada in like a positive direction. Just because I have my own problems with giving my wet and sloppy, full-throated endorsement to this budget doesn't mean that I think this is the budget that, won't get ready for this, catalyze the Canadian economy. PC Steve is in my community right now. He's pogging. He's jumping up like a cat. Like that one video, the baby cat jump. That's PC Steve right now in my community. Remember when our fallen comrade, Mr. Boots, said that the Liberals' plan was the one that actually seemed like it would get homes built? Well, I think that's a clever point. And so I'm going to yonk it. I think this is the plan that will actually grow the Canadian economy. All the others are dumb. Look, it does not look like a lot of work right now to read your script, but it's so hot in this room, and I can't have the fan on, and I can't have the windows open. Oh my God, I've had to take breaks and go outside in the cold Canadian winter. Okay, we power through. Now, something new in this budget that has been drawing a lot of criticism, but something that I actually like, is the budget has been split up into capital expenditures and operating expenditures. And I like that. I think it's cute. You may have heard the crazy number the Conservatives keep talking about, that say the budget is the deficit is $78 billion, which is like twice the size of Trudeau's previous target deficit. And that's true, but the main argument coming from the Liberals is one that you'll now understand. The vast majority of the new spending is an investment into Canada, one that will most likely have a much higher return on investment than the measly interest rate on Canada's debt, which is really low because we are a AAA rated country. We have like a 2% interest, crazy taxing. Now, the majority of the projected deficit this year will be capital investment, but the plan is to have 100% of the deficit by budget 28-29 to be capital investment only, and for Canada to be investing just under $60 billion a year into the economy, which I like. I think that's good. The way it'll be doing this is by roughly cutting $60 billion over 5 years from the operational spending budget. That doesn't list out item by item what makes up the capital spending, because most projects haven't even been announced yet, so I understand. But the budget does try its best to be as upfront and honest about this distinction moving forward, which I really like. It shows in relatively clean and understandable detail the categories of what the government considers capital investment, those being capital transfers to other levels of government and organizations expressly intended for the recipient to invest in infrastructure or a productive asset, capital-focused tax incentives, like with the productivity super deduction, which I will go into later, amortization of federal capital assets, private sector research and development, which I love a lot, support to unlock large-scale private sector capital investment, and finally, measures to grow the housing stock. Thank fucking God. How it plans to spend that money, how much of the block of planned capital investment is taken up by each of the categories I said, how much that block is using generally accepted accounting principles like depreciation and amortization, but also just the actual money that is leaving the coffers, that is like actually being spent. It gives an example of capital spending, like expanding airport cargo capacity, which, I mean, yeah, that's smart. It also shows similar countries and I guess provinces who run these kind of numbers, and it's relatively similar, I guess. However, it does kind of show that this can be a little bit leasy-geesey, a little bit loosey-goosey. For starters, they are the only country to count capital amortization, which is where you spread the cost of something out for its useful life, in their definition. Kind of be used to fudge numbers, because it does kind of sound like, when like, you ever seen a clip of people being like, oh, girl math, and then like they find a way to like get $100 shirt down to like 25 cents a wear? It's like that. Well, it's kind of like that, except it does actually make sense here to use for a large organization that will be expected to exist for a while, like a corporation or the government. I actually can't believe I described a generally accepted accounting principle as like girl math, gang shit. Because all those big, beautiful, potential spikes in costs will and should kind of be averaged out anyway with such a large organization. And also, yeah, you will need to buy a new building if your old one fucking collapses. So why not write some of it down this year and the next year and the next year and the next year? It makes sense to do it. It makes sense. Depreciating away an asset makes sense. However, I would be lying to you if I did not say that the numbers are stark. Let me be clear, Obama. In no way am I trying to say the government using depreciation and amortization are like fiscal loopholes in any way. For anyone watching who knows more than I do, I'm not that dumb. I promise. I know what I'm talking about. Depreciation is fine. You should be doing it on like a balance sheet or income statement. For those who don't know, I started being interested in economics because I was like an investor as a teenager, and I really liked Warren Buffett. And so ever since I was like 14, I've been reading income statements and cash flow statements and balance sheets. Yeah, I know, I'm a loser. And I've been consistently beating the stock market, so I'm a good investor. So being the kid who was reading 10Ks and annual information forms in the 9th grade, I'm not surprised by a big gap in the recorded profit and loss for the income statement and the actual like cash flow. And to caveat this more, I am more used to private companies' books than the government's. So maybe this is normal. I have no clue. I'm not a public sector budget accountant. I'm none of that. I'm not that. And I know I'm doing the thing that like I chastise conservatives for doing, where like they're like, I'm just asking questions. I'm just putting this out there instead of like taking the time to learn the thing and put it into context for you. But with all that out of the way, with all that preamble out of the way, I think you should know this. Of the $78 billion deficit, roughly, and I mean roughly, it even says right here on the page with an asterisk, hey, these numbers might not fully add up because we have to use averages from all of the departments for this one. So roughly, $45 billion is how much we are going to be spending on capital investment on our budget. But since the budget is like an income statement, I'm pretty sure I'm reading this right. If the Canadian government were to actually publish a cash flow statement that strictly looks at how much money will be flowing in and out from the government's coffers, then the amount we are spending goes up to $77 billion. And that is just for the first year, which would make our annual deficit on a cash flow basis about $110 billion. Come back. I know I can hear fucking National Telegraph and Mr. Sunshine Baby soiling themselves, ready to make some good propaganda. Chillax. Smarter people than me have read this thing and probably more accurately than I have, especially the opposition, probably. So if this wasn't a generally accepted accounting principle, or maybe I'm just reading all of this wrong, then they'd have said something about it. You're not going to get that type of groundbreaking information from a guy who has his own outro. If no one else is talking about this, it's nothing, I promise. But looking ahead into the next year, that we see that the total capital investment recorded on our budget will be $56.7 billion, and total capital investments on a cash basis will be $92 billion. But it is also very loosey the goose because it is the only one here that counts corporate income tax credits, which can be scary because, well, damn, it really matters what type of corporate income tax credit you're talking about here. We'll get into it later, but there are ways to cut corporate taxes on corporations that would result in more economic growth and more money for the Canadian public, and ways you can do it that just take all of your dirty money, the money that you lazily got, and they give it to all the hardworking billionaires. But what it also does list out line by line, and the dollar amount, is the savings plan, which I actually think is incredibly fucking funny, because the second biggest line item in the list of ways the government will be saving money is to stop getting ripped off on weed. I'm not shitting you. So apparently, the government thinks that the second best way to save money comes just from the weed budget alone. And you know what? They're fucking right. I'm not even gonna lie. I had my doubts, okay? That Carney would be able to do it. I'll be honest, in the back of my head, I thought, they're not going to be able to find these savings. It's every politician says, oh, we'll cut the budget, but not really. Yeah, sure you will, bud. I didn't think the corn dog had it in him. But apparently nobody knew the Canadian government was just mass overpaying for weed. Like a lot. On page 322, the RCMP will also adjust how it delivers the cannabis for medical purposes benefit. Currently, the program reimburses medical cannabis at a rate of $8.50 per gram, which is significantly above the market price. RCMP will transition to reimburse at $6 per gram, which still remains above but closer to the market price. This adjustment maintains existing entitlements to meet the needs of RCMP members while ensuring the government is paying a fair price to provide this support for those members who already purchased medical cannabis for $6 per gram or less. They will see no charge. They're also correct here. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but if we take a look at the Canada Cannabis Spot Price Index, we see that the CCSI was indexed at $3.95 per gram as of October 2025, which is significantly lower than $8.50. Are you ready? Are you ready for the projected savings? You are not ready. You're not ready for the projected savings amount from just the weed. Are you ready? The government, realizing they're getting ripped off on weed, will save $4.4 fucking billion. Oh my God. Honest to God, though, that's not even fair to Justin Trudeau. If there was ever a man that looks like he would get sold lawn clippings for $9 a gram, it is Justin Trudeau. Like, if I become prime minister and my predecessor looks like this, and I find out the government had a program where it pays for weed, I'm like, check the budget now. Not now. Not now. Fucking right now. Not now. Right now. Don't check it now. Fucking right now. Anyway, I gotta hand it to my PM. My next puff will be dedicated to Mark Carney, the WEF, and the Canadian taxpayer. The other forms of savings are aligning pension benefits with the CPI, Consumer Price Index, returning international development assistance to a pre-pandemic level, prioritizing programming to focus on housing supply, implementing a fleet divestment strategy that will stop the maintenance and repair of older fleets for the Canadian Armed Forces. And bro, Trudeau, both his favorite tree programs are getting axed because the government will be wrapping up its plan to plant 2 billion trees. By the way, this was the stupidest fucking thing that we've... However, the coolest parts about this budget have not even been said yet. Hands down, easily the best part of the budget, page 172, $150 million to the CBC so they can bribe Europe so we can join Eurovision. Oh my God, if there is not like a fucking Canadian ABBA by the end of my lifetime that sings Dancing Queen like those fucking screaming Montreal Canadiens fans. Oh my God, please. Yes, I'm fucking serious. No, I'm not kidding. This might be the only time in world history that a federal budget has said the word Eurovision. But I'm serious. Canada is going to try and join Eurovision. Honest to God, if we have to pay quadruple the price, I think that would be fair. Fuck it. Double the deficit just so we can join Eurovision. We're going to fuck you, Australia. Australians, look at me right now in my cold, dead Ukrainian Manitoban eyes. I will fucking come for you. More seriously, the productivity super deduction. Woo! I've been recording for so fucking long at this point. I think I take another break and cool off because I'm starting to sweat. Look at my forehead. We be back right now. I'm not going anywhere. More seriously, the productivity super deduction. Typically speaking, cutting taxes on corporations to increase investment can kind of suck. Like, for example, if we cut taxes on corporations to increase investment, but then we find out that, well, we aren't going to get any investment anyway because it wasn't just the taxes capital markets didn't like. It was also the fact that there's a huge trade war happening with the world superpower versus literally everyone that made things a little bit unstable, and so they're not looking to invest right now. And so because of that, businesses aren't looking to invest, and we lower taxes for nothing, and now we have less money to fund the government. Yippee! But what's cool with the productivity super deduction is it's effectively a tax cut, but in a really cool way where it only goes into effect if companies actually give us the money and invest in our country first, which is awesome. I like this. Basically, when a company spends money, they're able to write that off as an expense. I hit my water bottle. When they spend money on an asset, they're just like the government, able to slowly depreciate that throughout the years through its useful life cycle, whatever the asset's useful life cycle is, as a cost to effectively lower their tax rate because they are not making as much profit because they just spent a bunch of money. It makes sense. However, this happens over many years, so there's some wiggle room there. They aren't scamming the government. They're not getting out of paying tax or whatever. They will need to replace the asset, so they'll just depreciate it. However, depreciation takes years. You have to spread it out over the asset's useful life cycle, which could be many years. If you're a tech company, then you think your GPU is going to last like 7 years, when it's going to last like 7 weeks. But what this does is it says, hey, you want to invest in Canada? Come on in. If you do invest, then you can depreciate the whole amount on the first year, which is really cool. And it helps out tremendously with a company's books and makes them that much more likely to invest in Canada. It means that the riskiest few years of a potential big project just got made a whole bunch easier to survive because they have that initial boost of cash flow. Not only that, but what this ends up doing is it brings our marginal effective tax rate down to the lowest in the G7, which is really cool. If that sounds really surprising, by the way, you should know that Canada has like really high taxes, but it also has like a lot of ways and like a stupid amount of programs and benefits and carve-outs that apply to a bunch of people. I want to defend my country for a sec, all right? If you're XQC, I don't know what kind of CPA you got, but if you're paying 50% in taxes, my guy, actually, you need a better CPA. But the reason this is called the productivity super deduction is because it only applies to certain capital investments. And this is something that I really, really appreciate. I do kind of get worried with this country's reaction to America basically self-owning and trying to bring back everything made in America That's not smart. Don't get me wrong, most of my clothes are from Canada. I like seeing something that is made in Canada or fucking fabriqué au Canada, madame, qu'est-ce que la shitter? Où est la shitter, madame? But honestly, I would prefer if we took this chance while the United States is trying to make everything itself and not try to beat them and seeing who can stab themselves in the knee more. And instead, just took the time to quickly steal that position as the world superpower and like the global tech hub that they were, so happy to give up. What that means is trying to move up the production ladder and trying to make more technologically advanced goods and services. The more specialization and the more technological advancement you have, the higher a premium you can charge on the things your country does. Almost any country can grow apples, and so apples are a commodity. It's a price of an apple, and that's the market price. Anyone can do it. But very few countries can make the incredibly advanced chips that powers Apple's iPhones. And Mark Carney really understands this. With the PSD, I'm going to say it from that because it's a lot, it reinstates the accelerated investment incentive and allows for immediate expensing of manufacturing or processing machinery and equipment, clean energy generation and energy conservation equipment, and zero emission vehicles, productivity enhancing assets, including patents, data, networking infrastructure, and computers. And my favorite, oh my God, immediate expensing for scientific research and experimental development. Hallelujah. And it doesn't stop there. All throughout the budget, I was able to pick up on these little things that kind of give me hope that we're not just trying to like out-pioneer or out-like Wild West the United States and do like those stupid base manufacturing stuff. When it started talking about giving assistance to workers in tariff industries, it made sure to not just say like we're going to give them money. It also like very, very often talked about like reskilling, retooling, and re-educating workers so they can do jobs that are more specialized. That's the word I wanted to say. I don't want to dumb people jobs and smart people jobs. Some tariff industries need to be protected, like steel and aluminum. If your country cannot make steel and aluminum, you're cooked. For some industries, instead of trying to hold on to the past, we should encourage workers who want to pick up a new, more specialized skill. Anyway, I'm super excited that Mark Carney seems to recognize productivity as the problem. You have no idea how badly I want our GDP per capita to be higher than the United States. I want that so fucking badly. Anyways, I've heard a bunch of talk about how this budget was underwhelming and it isn't doing enough, mainly from one party. Funny enough, I also hear that same party say things like it's doing too much, there's too much debt. I don't know how they can have both those things be true at the same time, but whatever. But I think this budget marks a do you get it? I think this budget marks a really big shift for Canada and one that I actually really, really, really want to happen, like badly. I think it could take Canada into an actual contender for not the world superpower, but definitely a world superpower. I'm incredibly excited that everything that Mark Carney is focused on is something that Canada desperately needs. However, there are things that Mark Carney is not focusing on that Canada also desperately needs. I'm not gonna lie. Christ. My light just burnt. Oh my God. Like the fill light. You know, see how I'm darker now? It's the light burnt. It just stopped. It's done. I was transferring the footage from the SD card to my computer. Shit is gone. This isn't working anymore. This isn't working anymore. The light is gone. This is hot to the touch. So that's fun. I won't lie. I don't think this budget does anything too amazing for the working man, and that does upset me. It upsets me because I like to talk a bunch about wealth inequality, and not from the perspective of a communist or a socialist, but from the perspective of someone who actually just wants those problems to be fixed. And this budget does literally nothing to fix that, which bums me out to an incredible amount. I do understand why, though. If we wanted to combat wealth inequality, the way we do that is by... Okay, the lights, just chill. If we wanted to combat wealth inequality, the way we do that is by charging higher taxes on the people who are higher up on the wealth and income spectrum. But if we just raise taxes on corporations right now, less investment would flow into Canada, and that really is not okay, unfortunately. My personal favorite solution to this is the global minimum corporate tax rate plan. That is actually really close to becoming a thing. The USA pulled out of it with Trump, though, and that sucks because they were like a major player. The really cool thing about the plan is that if there are some countries that don't want to participate because they want to be greedy little tax havens, the countries who are signed up to the plan, get charged top-up taxes, which would be really cool, and it would mean that, tax havens aren't really as effective anymore, which is good. Without that type of global cooperation, you really just aren't going to see anyone individually do it because they have no incentive to, and it would make their thing less competitive. Any world leader. That's why I thought Mr. Globalism himself would actually be able to kind of push on this, especially considering he absolutely recognizes wealth inequality as a problem. Seriously, we were so close to this happening, and then like the year before it was going to start happening, Trump was like, nah, and dipped, which is awesome. Some of you might be saying stuff like, oh, it's Jover, you know, Trump's not going to go for it. I don't think that's the case. And maybe he is doing this. I don't know because I'm not there. But I actually think it would be dead easy to, you know, position this as like he's the big swinging in charge and all the other countries are waiting on him. And the reason it would be so important to do this is because the countries who are stealing investment are getting away with stealing from America, further continuing to rip them off. But even Russia signed on to this deal. Like, fuck, I'm Ukrainian. I'd work with Putin if it meant getting Trump on board with this shit. It's very important. Anyway, that's my review of the budget and Canada's position more broadly. It's very complex. It's not just a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But I do hope I painted a clear portrait of my thoughts on it. If you want to support me making these types of like very long, very well-researched videos and you have the funds, please consider becoming a member. You have no idea how much it helps to have consistent money coming in when I take on these bigger projects. It really helps. It's not going to happen because of just this video, but a long-term goal for me would be to get 12 more members and have 25 members. Because if that happens, with memberships alone, I would beat the minimum $100 YouTube payment amount. And oh my God, I would be such a happy boy if I could do that, because then I could just work on these stupidly long videos without getting worried. So yeah. However, the best way to support me is and always will be to join the Discord server down below. Get active in the community. All that stuff. Anyway, that's all for this video. I know it's really long. Next video on Pierre Poilievre and like everything going on with the Conservatives will be shorter and coming out soon. I'm gonna go disintegrate.